Well, that's
and
the
then,
other thing
so
is like
who do you think
every
leveled
woman
up?
in
Who
this
do you
world
think
is
leveled
beautiful
up?
so far, right? Except for Elsbeth Luan, who we don't know isn't beautiful. She's just a beast. It's death metal.
I think they
All right.
mentioned 90
Oh,
being
she-
pretty. They haven't said beautiful.
Well, okay.
She's just in really good shape.
She works out. All right, and welcome to the Jack of the Shadows podcast. I'm Erik Van Conen. I'm joined by my brothers David and Adam. Say hello, boys.
Hello, boys.
Hello.
This first go-round, we're going to cover 7 chapters, technically, the first 6, and then the prologue as well. So let's launch into a conversation about the prologue. One of the things that I noticed about this prologue is that there is a ton of brand new information. We get introduced to Luz Theron right at the beginning there and his bride, Ilyena. Then there is a reference to mind twisting. What the heck is that? The World Sea. Luz Theron is referred to as Lord of the Morning. There's a reference to the voice and singing. Shaitan is introduced. They talk about the taint.
Yeah, most importantly, they're talking about
Yeah.
Sidene comes in there. And
Yes. Light blinded. Ethan Morin, Tarandai, betrayer of hope. So there's a lot of nomenclature that gets thrown in here at us very, very quickly. Not to mention you're struggling to figure out what is happening in this prologue.
what Jordan is doing here is just pulling you into his world right away, even though you don't know what the heck's going on.
I just think it's interesting that you get thrown into it right away, and obviously one guy is acting like he's absolutely just gone bonkers, is unaware about everything that has happened around him. Pretty interesting way to start a story, and then just leave it.
And this is the prologue, so I don't know how many people see, prologue, I don't necessarily need to read that or not, because it's
right.
technically not the first chapter. The very first time I read this, I got to the end, and I was still a little confused as to what's going on. But everything is there. All of the information is there for how the prologue concludes. So you're done reading the prologue, and where are you at as far as what you've read there and what's occurred?
Wow. First of all, it's almost difficult to determine who's good and who's bad.
Yeah.
Because taking Shaitan out of it, okay, that we all know that's another name, and that's something that Jordan does. He borrows from a lot of different religions and different cultural things, but he, in the terms of let's say classic good and evil, he uses Shaitan particularly, which kind of helps you try to figure out a little bit.
Yeah, it contextualizes things for you because
Right,
it's
good
a
and who's
cognomen. Right. It sounds like Satan.
Exactly.
Something that he does a really good job of off the bat is that he presents Luz Theron that you're going to have some sort of empathy or human reaction to him because of what he's going through. And he's talking about the fact that you should come over and you should hang out with me and my wife, and you should come over and we should play some dominoes, throw some bones, or she's really good at conversation. He's going through a lot, and he had this deep, meaningful relationship with this woman that's on the ground. There's so much presented right there. So yeah, there is the struggle of good and evil there, but I think that he's differentiated in that sense.
You're right. So the other guy, who's not Luz Theron, the man of many different names, there's nothing to like about him.
Right.
He's giving you nothing in that chapter to like. Right. Or in the prologue, there's nothing to like about him. Whereas with Luz Theron, you're right. He's giving you personality. He's giving you that warmth of character.
Yeah.
Even though he's gone off his rockers and into the deep end. When he wasn't that way, you could see that was probably the type of person that he was. So yeah, that kind of makes sense.
And we could say was because he completely flames out at the end of the chapter.
He turns into a mountain.
Right.
What a way to go. I mean, if you're going to go, turn into a mountain.
Through a smoldering beam of light.
Right.
It's interesting because
there's a lot of power that's presented.
Oh yeah, and it's presented in biblical terms, like the hyperbole
Yeah.
that he has in the description of that scene borders on ridiculous for me. But there's some interesting dramatic irony at the beginning of it, because the very first couple of sentences talk about this woman who's on the ground, who we very quickly as an audience member become aware of, and it very quickly becomes apparent that this is his dead wife that's on the ground, that he's that is literally like somewhere at his feet, and that he's kicking around as
he literally walks over and his
as
cloak trails in
as he wanders around the room. So obviously something is amiss here, and then he has this conversation with the betrayer of hope.
What a name.
Right, yeah. Hey,
one of many.
Jordan,
no big deal.
Jordan doesn't mince sides here. As much as there might be some ambiguity here with who's good and who's bad, it's very obvious that Theron has gone insane. And so whatever atrocities he's committed in madness. And therefore, I don't think that you can hold him personally responsible for the destruction as a reader. It's just a tragedy.
Well, I mean, that goes to anything. And if you're paralleling it to life, we have many mass murderers who are insane, who we don't like. Whether or not they're guilty of their crimes, you still don't like them. And so the juxtaposition here is you don't want to like him because he murdered his wife, whether he did it in an act of craziness or not. And yet he's showing us, but you actually do want to like this guy, which is what Adam was talking about, because he's presenting that other side of him. It's like it's a tough sell, but I think he sells it well in the fact that you may not want to like this guy for what he's done, but you can't help but like him because of who he is, apart from, by the way, killing his wife.
Yeah, and that being presented in that short of a time period and a couple pages is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's like you get hit in the face with a hammer right away.
It's about 4 or 5 pages in the Tor mass market paperback. So yeah, it's a relatively short section.
Yeah, so you're asking how I felt at the end of it. I don't know. I mean, I went into the next chapter, and then it's just all of a sudden getting into a completely
right. So you finish with this chapter, and the things that are there's this guy who is obviously powerful and some kind of sorcerer tapping into some sort of source. He's gone insane. He's killed a lot of people. There are these other references to like Saidin, whatever that is. It's obviously something that he's tapping into. It seems like somehow it's been tainted. So somehow it's been, manipulated and it's not necessarily good.
The well's been poisoned.
And then at the end of the chapter, he self-immolates and there's this volcano that he creates.
Pretty
and you're
badass.
like, okay, I have a vague idea as to what's going on here. Let's find out how this story develops by turning to chapter 1.
Yeah. And then it's like, quaint village, little town.
Right. So we get to chapter 1, and it's a father and son now who are walking on their way from their house to Beltane, the local equinox celebration. And it's just like, hey, remember all that information I just gave you in the prologue? Meh.
There's no time reference either.
There is. Exactly. There actually is.
Well, it doesn't say 400 years later, like you're watching a movie and now modern day. It doesn't really say that.
No, but at the end
it doesn't start off with meanwhile.
At the end of the prologue, there is a prophecy. There are 2 of them actually that are cited, and both of them are referenced as being part of the 4th age.
But that's taking into account that you know what the 4th age is.
Well, right. Well, we don't know what ages 1 through 3 are.
No, nor do we know if what just happened with Luce Theron is in the 4th age or it's the 3rd age. If chapter 1's in the 5th age, you have no idea. Now, in the beginning, however, of chapter 1, it does say,
the 3rd
it's called the 3rd age.
Right.
But that prophecy was in the 4th age.
Correct.
So the question is, did the prophecy happen after? It's a little confusing.
So what we do know is that the first chapter begins in the 3rd age. What we also know through the prologue and the first chapter is that we are in a world of some sort of pseudo-reincarnation where time is a circle and people reappear somehow. And that ages play out over and over again, whatever that means. And supposedly characters play out, and this dragon, Luce Theron, is going to re-emerge somehow at some point, along with other characters in the cycle of this world's lifetime.
It would be the wheel?
Right. And there's a reference to a wheel in the prologue. Okay, so we start the first chapter, and it's very clear from the first probably 4 paragraphs that we're not going to get answers to whatever it was that occurred in the prologue.
True, yeah. But something that he does is he's like taking it down this road with father and son, but there's some mystery that just pops up right away.
Yeah, there is. You're kind of like, where are we? But then you don't care because he's drawing you in with something else.
Yeah, something happens right away. It's really good.
So you're referencing that Rand looks backward and sees a Dark Rider.
Yeah.
It's a weird version of the Ring Wraiths.
I don't think it's actually called the Dark Rider. We slipped into
Right.
Tolkien terminology.
Well, right, exactly, because there's a lot of similarities here. This first chapter, we're introduced into a world, or at least a countryside, that's in transition. It's springtime, supposedly.
Brandy, a horse, and a father and a son.
Well, at first I thought, I was like, who's Brandy?
Right. Some girl we grew up with.
Yeah, that's what they're singing when they're going down.
Right.
What's behind us, Dad?
He looks backward in typical, story fashion. The father looks back and is like, oh, I don't see anything.
I see
You
nothing.
Crazy kook. So we're in a transitional period. It's spring, which is a transitional season, except obviously in this world, spring hasn't come. There's still snow on the ground. Spring is supposed to have been a month old at this point. They've got their cloaks wrapped around them. Obviously, everybody's still cold, even though they're going to this spring festival. Then we have this pseudo-Tolkien reference to a man in black who just disappears.
I love the fact that his cape or whatever he's wearing doesn't move when he moves,
His
or
cloak,
when he
yeah.
like when the wind's blowing. It's so creepy. It's such a nice detail.
Well, and that's a great reveal. He feels like there's something strange going on, and he can't figure it out.
Yeah,
And
what's up,
then 10 minutes later, he realizes, oh my gosh, that's what was weird.
Yeah, it isn't just that it's some guy who appeared behind him. It's like some...
It's incredibly windy, and the dude's
Abnormal.
cloak is not moving. He's just sitting there
But what's great about
on a
that is
horse.
it might take a while to not
Right.
notice that.
You're so caught up in the fact that some guy's
Yeah.
there and then he's not there that you're not picking up on the minute details. And to the other point is, why is this guy appearing to Rand and not to his father?
Yeah.
And it's building this really cool mystery of the guy's there for a reason. He's not going to not just reappear again. He's there for a reason.
I don't think
Very
it's so
much
much that
building
he's
a mystery.
not appearing to his father as it is the dude moves fast.
Well,
He's there, and Rand can see
who
him,
knows?
and
He's not moving
he.
in the wind.
If you don't have to worry about the wind resisting you, you can move a lot faster. He attracts his father's attention and has him look back, and then he's gone like Batman. So
Yeah.
we get introduced to more characters than just those two.
Right.
We get introduced here to Egwene, the Congers, who are like the Sackville Bagginses of,
The Coplids.
Copland's
well, the Coplans and the Congers, right?
Yeah.
These are a couple of characters that that emerge as
Bagginses.
they enter Two Rivers, right? So they're the
It's
local.
it's a really nice community feel. He like sets up everybody. Everybody has their place and their time, even the annoying characters.
Well, yeah. It's,
Because you always got
it's,
that in the
it's like
village.
any small town where you've got
Yeah.
it's a nice community, but you got your annoying people that are going to drive you wonky.
It's the Shire, which is an
They're
English
sniffing around that.
or a German countryside.
They're also selling pipeweed. They're selling.
They sell tobacco,
leaf.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is the Shire's most popular product, and also a major export for the Two Rivers. So we've got Whit Conger and Daisy Conger, and then we get introduced to Sen Bui.
Oh, I love Sembui.
You do, huh?
The cantankerous, cranky.
Oh, I just love him as a character. He's just so ridiculous. It's just like, oh my gosh, Sen, why is anyone putting up with you?
Yeah, how he hasn't gotten
Because you
knocked
can
on the
fix
noggin.
roofs?
Yeah, because you can fix
Roof-
roofs. Well,
roof?
you need a roof over your head, so I suppose they put up with him for that
Yeah.
reason.
And
But
they're like, ah.
So Sen is the Thatcher. He's the guy who's responsible for repairing everybody's roofs in the town.
I think he's more responsible for just creating
Right.
just creating.
he's a rabble
unfortunate
rouser. That's
conversation.
really why he's there.
He's the oldest guy in the town and also the biggest pain in the butt.
Yeah.
And he's fixing roofs. He's getting up there. My question is, do they have ladders, or are they just? Is he going up like a pole?
No, he's just jumping.
I'm hoping
He's
he's,
just-
hoping he's
just
climbing.
He's just jumping from a standing position and landing on the roof like a cat.
It's like Jack Beanstalk. He's hopping over
Oh
things.
man, yeah.
He is an interesting cat that gets more and more interesting as the story unfolds.
Well, whatever. What we've been introduced to him so far is good riddance to you, fella. I don't even want to have you come over and drink some ale with me.
No, because you're likely to complain about the fact that it's over fermented or that, it tastes like it was from last year instead of this year.
So them, and then we get introduced to other more important characters like Matt.
Well, we're also seeing, and the journey to the town before they get to town is Rand's really close relationship with his father. And he's showing us how those two are kind of joined at the hip.
And they're kind of separated from the town also because
they are.
How far out do you think they are? Because this will come up later.
It will come up later. A good distance.
Because I'm confused. It's a good. Is it an hour and a half?
Yes, I would say they're probably about an hour away.
I would say it's more than that because they talk about it's like a day, half day's journey for him to get.
I think it's like an hour and a half.
Another thing to think about.
Yes.
And which we're talking about who they've met is who they haven't met. You hear no mention of Rand's mom.
Very true. Very, very true.
A couple of things that we do hear in this first chapter that are references to the prologue. The Dark One is mentioned, and he's also referred to as the Shepherd of the Night. The dragon is mentioned.
The Dark One gets named by someone. And we realize that's a big deal.
They talk about someone naming the Dark One.
This is the thing that I find interesting here in this first chapter, because with a lot of fantasy, one of the things that the authors focus on is the religion of the world. And the thing that I find interesting about this particular world that Jordan's creating is you don't really get a religion, you get a superstition. Like, there's just a bunch of things that obviously have some kind of an impact, but we have no places of worship, but there are these superstitions that they have around evil, it seems like most of all. There's references to Shaitan and the Dark One, and within these first 6 chapters, somebody cites the Dark One, and their crops get messed up.
There's also reference to a town wisdom, too, so that is bringing in an aspect of spirituality.
It's more just...
But she has a pragmatic purpose.
It's more just light and dark, and there's no
structured worship around the light.
No, it's just kind of...
It's all just seems to be fear of the dark. And so that was interesting, and I was kind of waiting after these first couple of chapters to see how that develops. There are some locations we also get introduced to here. The very first paragraph talks about the wind coming off of the mountains of mist, which is also a very, very Tolkien-esque location. Then you've got the Sandhills, obviously the 2 rivers, which is the geographic area that Emond's Field is located in. You've got Emond's Field.
There are like big worms underneath those sand fields.
This is not Dune.
Right, or Tremors. You've got Westwood, the Mountains of Mist, the Waterwood, Devon Ride, Watch Hill, Bear Lawn, and Terran's Ferry.
Just like jumping around here a little bit, but eventually Perrin has a conversation about how far he's been away from there. So there is this idea that this is just comfortable living. You're not going to leave here. This is generations here. And then also Egwene, like, she brings up that she might leave, which is just like a huge thing to Rand.
So the first chapter wraps up. Rand and his father arrive in town. They bring the brandy to the inn, so we're introduced to Bran Alvear.
That's got to be so good.
The brandy?
Oh, yeah.
It's craft distilled.
It's going to be sweet. Sweet apple brandy.
It puts Tito's to shame.
One's a vodka and one's not a brandy.
Tito's is not a sponsor of this.
No, right.
Not yet.
These are just things
I'm just throwing out as much product placement as I can with the hopes that at some point they find this uninteresting blather worth sponsoring.
I will gladly wear Tito's gear all around the place, so,
Up and down the town.
Including just some straight booty shorts.
These guys are... No thanks.
No one wants to see that.
Nope, we don't.
I think I can come up with some people I would want to.
Yeah, okay. Well, you can have fun with that.
I'll name names.
So they're isolated, though. I mean, they live in this is the Shire. They're happy with their lives, but even they know how isolated they are. They bring the brandy to the inn, and that's where the chapter wraps up. So we move on from there to chapter 2, which is the strangers. And like any great story, strangers get introduced into this isolated world. Who are these strangers?
There are a couple of strangers that get pointed out there.
There's several strangers. It's not just, two.
Also, the interesting thing about it is that not only are there several strangers, but you have people introducing the strangers, and they introduce a few strangers, and they're not aware of the other strangers that are involved in the town, too. So it's like they're just getting blown up.
It's an infestation of strangers.
Emmons Field is getting blowed up.
They are. They're very excited. I love how excited they are for this little program they have going on, though.
Well,
they're so surprised that there's going to be this guy who's just going to...
Which guy?
Right.
This guy who's in love with you?
We're talking about, that wants to see you in your booty shorts?
I can't think of the name. What
wants
is
to
he?
see
Not
me
the
in the booty
layman,
shorts.
the showman? The showman?
The Gleeman?
The Gleeman.
The Gleeman. They're very excited about this Gleeman, which I think is so fantastic.
Well, and
because he's a big deal.
He's a big deal.
It's a huge deal for it. And that just goes once again to reiterate this small town feel of like having this guy come in. And heck, I would love to have someone come and tell me stories.
Oh, no kidding. You could probably play the lute.
I'll tell you a story, David.
I don't know what that was.
I don't know what story.
I'm not going to listen to any stories being told like that. How they do it, take a bath or something. But so it's cool.
Let me tell you a story.
He's hopefully not talking to the town in that voice either.
Once upon a time,
he's apparently become an evil leprechaun.
I know. What's up?
So this guy's coming in. They're talking about him. They're excited. He's going to tell stories. He's kind of Gandalf-y in the sense of Gandalf brought the fireworks.
He's Fluter Flan.
Yeah. Well, okay. Now we've brought in a whole other book.
Yeah.
It's cool. They're excited. They're all geeked up about this guy. But the awesome thing is I want to meet this guy. You're reading this book. You're like, where is this guy? I totally want to find out more about this guy.
100%.
But if you're looking at it strangers, so it's not just that guy. There's more going on, and the way they're talking about the other strangers is different than the way they're talking about the Gleeman.
Very true.
The way they're talking about the other strangers is mysterious and
mystery.
Yeah, exactly.
So Ewan Finnegar introduces the idea of the two strangers that probably, in addition to Tom, provide this chapter with its name. He mentions the fact that there is Moiraine and Lan who have come and visited the town from outside, who are unexpected. These are the unexpected strangers.
And not everyone knew they'd hired a Gleeman either.
But he is expected in the town because the town council knows they've hired a Gleeman.
The town council does, yeah. I don't think the lay people do, though.
They don't know that. They don't know that there are fireworks coming.
They were certainly excited about the possibility, though.
Right. And who is it that spread the rumor that fireworks might be coming?
Well,
none other than
our favorite crazy guy, Sen Bui. Yeah. What is the redeeming factor of Mr. Bui? Can somebody tell me, please?
He thatches roofs.
Right, he does.
He hops up them on a single bound.
And because he can do it, he can do it in a one jump.
Right, because he doesn't require a ladder.
Person.
He leaps buildings in a single bound. So we've got an introduction to a couple of strangers. We get very briefly introduced to them here.
Who have we met up to the point in chapter 2?
Bran Alvear,
Haral Luhan, John Thane the Miller, Ewan Finnegar, Dag Coplin. We hear about Alsbeth Luhan, Moiraine, Lan, Nynaeve, Rowan Hum, Samuel Craw, Hugh, and Tag, the Tad, thank you, horse keepers.
Yeah.
So
for
I
the
think people that we've actually
Tweedledee and Tweedledum. The other interesting thing that happens in here is there is a conversation between Matt and Ewan where he references mythological creatures, the Trollocs.
Oh.
So there's a couple of references to these mythological evils that are told to children by their mothers as a way to scare them into good behavior. So we're in this countryside world where the only real evil is imaginary outside of this crazy instance of Shaitan's name being spoken and then somebody's crops getting worms instantaneously. But all the other evils are simply imagined and ghost stories.
They do meet Lan and Moiraine. The conversation happens.
So this is the conversation between.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when he meets them. She talks about them.
She seems very well put together.
And more importantly, at the end of chapter 2, Moiraine gives all the country folk, the people,
boys.
she gives them the money.
She gives them a coin.
The coin. And some people's coins are of greater value than other people's coins.
Right, Ewan Finnegar
what's up
gets
with that?
the short shrift.
Right.
He's pretty happy about it, though.
He is.
He's got money to spend.
He said no.
And then he decides not to spend it because the older boys say that they're not going to spend theirs. So in typical young person fashion, he's
Wait,
like,
but
"Oh,
they
then
had
I
already
won't spend
talked
mine."
about the fact that
They do pick off the Raven. And that's the one where the stone throwing
Yeah.
at the Raven comes in, and that's right before they meet Moiraine.
Yes.
Because
See,
she
it's a bad
comments
idea.
on them being
So
filthy creatures.
right. So here's another reference. I mean, she obviously has some ideas of the Dark One and his potency in the world that they don't, which is interesting. So then, chapter 3, the peddler arrives. The peddler. We
crows
get
loved
introduced
it.
to Podden
Yeah,
Fane.
Podden fan.
Yes, Passamaquoddy.
This
This
Fane,
guy.
So
He loves
himself.
having attention.
he does, and the amazing thing is, like, it makes the villagers in Emmons Field seem incredibly quaint and naive.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't care about them at all beyond their ability to feed his ego by being an audience to his stage play.
Yeah.
And they don't see it. Like, they love him, and he thinks that they're a bunch of fools.
Yeah.
I think it's understandable, though.
But
They're not.
he comes to them to sell his stuff and to get attention because he's the voice from the outside.
Yes.
Whether he's twisting those words, whether he's not, no one knows, and no one ever necessarily exactly cares. They kind of question about
What do you mean?
importance.
I don't think that it's that unrealistic of a situation, though, because first of all, the guy is supposed to be entertaining. Not only that, he's selling them things as well. So,
But they do
He's not
touch
only-
upon.
yeah, I mean, they jump in. They're like, "Hey, we're going to bring you into this city council meeting," and then you get thrown into the fact that that's not women's work, and women's work is more impressive
Right, and
from one
they
character
do.
down the road.
It's like they want the peddler to like them because Rand mentioned something about the fact that Padan had never even taken notice of him until
The year
before.
Right.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
That's weird.
Yeah, but they're also painting Fane out for
He's-
one
he's
reason or
like
another.
a-
He's kind of slick and he's kind of
Every
oily. And,
little bit.
yeah,
What is that?
exactly. You don't really like him, but they like him.
Right. So there's the disconnect between the reader and his audience in the town. We
Totally.
get references to the fact that he's always smiling and laughing, and this is a direct quotation from the book. He's always smiling and laughing as if he knew a joke that no one else knew.
Right, and it's almost like the joke is
yeah,
at the
I don't
people's
like that.
expense.
Here's
one
another
funny.
quotation. His friendliness has always been of a peculiarly distant kind, backslapping without ever getting close. So he obviously holds himself at arm's length from these people, but appreciates their rapt attention. And also, obviously, in this chapter, he has a lot to tell. There's a lot going on outside, and he knows the reaction that he's going to get from them when he describes it.
Yeah, so he milks it.
I
And
think
he-
it's also
He gets the
been brought
reaction
up
he
a couple
wants.
times that people that live in the Two Rivers are stubborn
Yep.
and
Right.
hardworking.
That's another Tolkien crossover, and you can probably find it in other fantasy stories that begin in this sort of pastoral setting, where the farm people they only get by through hard work because
Yep.
even though their existence has this peacefulness to it, all of that comes through an incredible amount
crop.
of labor. So
You're facing a lot of adversity at that point.
it's man versus nature. I mean, you're struggling
Mhm.
against the elements, and at this point in the story, the elements have obviously taken on an aggressive
They've changed.
nature toward you.
Yeah. People are worried about that, so that's understandable. When he comes into town and he starts talking about war, basically,
Right, he's
that
talking about
the people
war
are
and he's
worried
talking about the
that
dragon.
because, yeah, they're talking about the dragon, how that's going to change basically the environment. and they're already seeing that happen. So that's just gonna be a trigger. So pretty fascinating.
So we get references here to the dragon and Aes Sedai in this chapter, which is, okay, what? The dragon we get because we've had a reference to him before, so thank heavens we're starting to develop whatever the heck the prologue was.
Sure, whatever that means.
And there's reference to the fact that he can channel, so now we're getting, a little bit of a better idea that there's some power that's moving this world that certain people can somehow tap into, though how those people fit into this particular existence is completely foreign, because that's
so lightly brushed. That's just
even though we've talked about the light and dark, not everyone has this understanding of where that line is. Some people think the dragon is bad, and other people castigate them for saying, no, he's not bad. The dragon's the one that's going to fight the darkness. So you're seeing that already, but you're seeing this misunderstanding between people of the superstition side of things, of what's good, what's bad, who's who, and not everyone gets it. Not everyone understands it, which is going to create, more confusion and then tension between the townspeople, which the tension is brought in by this news. It's interesting, and then it just kind of the way they talk about, the dragon, and then you hear all these things about him. He's the one that did this. He's the one that did that. Is he gonna do this? Is he gonna do that? There's a whole lot of references to what the dragon is going to do, what he isn't going to do, who he is, who he isn't. There's a lot thrown in there,
and that feeds into my whole philosophy that this is really a world of superstition rather than religion, because there's no codification of, if we use the end of the prologue as any kind of an idea of who the dragon is. And in these first 6 chapters, we also get confusion of who these Aes Sedai are and who they are in relationship to the people. Like these two, the dragon being a character and the Aes Sedai being a classification of people, there are extremely divergent opinions upon them. There's no middle ground on either of them. So and once again, that feeds into the idea that this is a superstition and not a religion with clear set out laws.
Then the town council decides, all right, we've had enough of the crowd getting riled up.
Right.
We're going to take Padan away with us.
Yeah.
And the crowd gets really ticked.
Right. So he comes in and says, "Hey,
he drops this bomb.
There's a war going on outside outside your villages, and people are setting fires to things in the name of the dragon."
This is the way Erik has created this voice.
Yes.
Notice, mind you.
I like this.
You like this version of Padan? And then the town starts getting riled up over it. And wouldn't you know, Senbui is in the middle of it, riling up the town, which once again, has this guy not been set out on the borders of the town and sent on his way? I still don't even know why they live with him.
Because he thatches roofs.
Right. Oh, that's right. I've forgotten, because he patches the holes in their ceilings.
Yeah.
Erik, I think the main thing is you don't understand what it would be like to see an old man jump into the top of a roof in one leap.
I am obviously undervaluing the Thatcher. That's the problem.
Right.
Becky or Margaret.
We were talking earlier about characters.
Thatcher.
We've also, in this chapter, met Perrin. So we've had Matt and Rand in the previous chapters. Now we've met Perrin.
Yeah.
Who will now come into play in the conversation after the Padan and the fantastic Thatcher get the argument, and the Padan goes away with the council. Perrin and Matt and Rand all start talking about their take on the dragon and what that's about, and who that is, and Aes Sedai and all this sort of thing. And they have ingrained into them the different belief structures of the town they grew up in, and this is something that, I'm just going to speak in general, Jordan terms here, goes throughout the whole series of how ingrained a belief structure a person has, no matter what they see in front of them, no matter what they experience. And it's just like in today's society, it can be there, it can be smacking you in the face, it could be dancing all about you, but you're so ingrained into what you think and what you believe that you're going to cling to that despite the situation that's happening around you. And it's interesting that certain characters in this do this to a greater or lesser degree throughout the series, and he's starting to show it already in their conversations with them and their interactions, with the other townsfolk around them.
That's there more to define this isolated town.
Yeah.
As we start to branch out, we'll see different ideologies kind of being presented.
There's going to be like
some that are
beep,
more
beep,
open.
beep, fellas. Back that up.
The Gleeman finally emerges from his
Yes,
sleep.
but not before we meet Egwene.
Right.
And
Egwene
by the
swoops
way,
into the conversation,
love
getting
meeting
mad at those
Egwene.
two. Those three.
Love meeting Egwene.
you love...
She's got some attitude, but I like
she's
I like the
saucy.
description of what she is. We're just into it.
We have learned already that Adam has a thing for Egwene.
Here's the other thing that we get with Egwene is now we have a description of much of the town.
Nynaeve also. Yeah.
Right. They all have brown eyes. Or dark eyes. They all have dark skin. They all have dark hair.
But, dun, 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 not all of them.
Right. Not all of them.
Clearly you're talking about Senbui.
He has no eyes. That adds to the impressiveness.
Obviously, he's a supernatural being because
Right, 'cause
who
he can
else
leap.
can leap
Right.
tall buildings with a single bound?
Boing,
If there's one thing people can take away from this podcast, it's the uniqueness of Senbui and his magical powers.
And his similarities to Clark Kent.
Yeah.
So Rand is a stranger because he has light eyes and reddish brown hair.
He's also very tall.
And he's very tall and an axe handle wide, which apparently
shoulders.
so is
Yeah.
right, not at the gut.
So it would not be a good start.
Which apparently so
is Perrin, but even
Perrin.
bigger. Not as tall, but
Right.
Oh,
bigger.
Perrin's a
Right.
big boy.
Right.
Perrin's a
Matt's
big boy.
tall too.
Right.
We've talked about Egwene, and we start to see the relationship between Egwene and Rand.
Well, that's been
something
developed
there.
over the first 3 chapters
Well,
because
you heard about it, but now you're experiencing
No,
it.
I just
And
hope
it's
I hope the two of them make it.
It's that whole.
you do.
Yeah, you want them to because it's like they talk about it. Rand's been thinking about it. He's like, oh, I'm gonna go to town. I'm gonna see Egwene again. Ooh,
Yeah, I want to read that
that's what
chapter.
that's all about. Like,
She
but at the
brings
same
up
time,
some weird stuff that she's
Right.
like, I might be leaving here.
right, yeah.
Right.
So
Bye.
There's also the feeling that she could also be using that in order to cajole his interest. We also get the sense that there is a town expectation that these two are going to get married
Sure,
at some
yeah.
point. And they, at some level, realize it as well. And that's why Rand mentions the fact that now he's becoming uncomfortable around her, but still wants to be around her.
we're also finding out more about these characters as well. They talk about Perrin. He's just very steady. Matt's a rabble rouser. He's instigated many situations of mayhem in the town.
Yeah, he's the town clown.
He's still in many pies.
town trouble
that have
causer.
been cooling.
Exactly.
In
He's got his thumb in many
window
pie.
still.
The other thing that we get is it's obvious that Matt and Egwene share an adventurous spirit. Even if she's just using it as a way to try to get Rand to admit his interest in her, she still does have an adventurous spirit. Right. She still does imagine that life could be possible really outside of Emmons Field.
Really playful.
And Matt is obviously interested in any opportunity to get out of Emmons Field would be welcomed, even though he doesn't imagine that's ever going to occur. We are on to chapter 4.
Okay.
Chapter 4.
So the Gleeman Tom emerges from his late night escapade because obviously he's arrived in the middle of the night and been disappointed that Master Alvear took a tremendous rattling of the front door in order to let him in and then never bothered to tell him that he was the mayor. So Tom emerges and has a conversation with them at the.
Check out my cloak.
He's just fascinating. Just
you want to talk about? All right. Can you name all of the different patches on Tom's cloak? Go.
No, I cannot.
One is a candle with Senbui jumping over it.
Right? No, it's not. It's a flaming home with Senbui jumping over it.
Yes. His britches have been burned. He's Adam.
Cut to Adam completely confused
about the patches.
That's very funny to me. No, I was saying his cloak is just really interesting the way that it's described. It's this big deal.
It's a patchwork quilt.
It's a character of its own. It's sown them.
I keep trying to picture this.
Okay,
like, are the
sure.
and it talks about how the patches. I don't think they're like sewn all the way on.
Oh, they are.
Like because they talk about how the patches kind of flap about.
What they're referencing there is the way that the numerous patches, which are all different, grab the light. And that's what it's there for, is to generate interest and to be eye-catching in almost an obnoxious way. Because he's not a bard. He's a gleeman. He travels from town to town as opposed to...
He was once a court bard.
So he says.
Yes.
The other interesting thing is that the cape isn't made of these patches. There is an actual cape, and these patches are sewn onto it.
Right.
Which is
But the cape
apparently
seems
like a
pretty
gleeman
impressive.
thing.
So he comes out and he immediately
He's flourishing it.
Yeah, he does flourish. You get this sense he is very full of himself, but you don't get the sense. So
think he's
the
like
difference,
Not in the way that Podden
right?
Fane is.
Exactly, and that's Jordan makes a distinct point to point that out, that he has a sense of himself. But you kind of have to be in that role. But he's not coming across smarmy, or he's not coming across disingenuous or looking down upon the townspeople per se. He does make them. I think he kind of views them as country bumpkins, but he doesn't view them in a negative way because they're paying his bill. But
It also seems like he's been around a bit.
To that point, Adam, they talk about the news that Podden has given them, and Marilyn kind of is like, that's old news. So he has I don't know if it's a distrust of Podden or what it is, but he kind of discounts Podden and just has kind of an interesting comment he says about him.
He obviously has an opinion about Fane. He obviously believes that he's being unfair with
he mentions that the quote
crowd.
Specifically is, Fane was always one to carry bad news quickly, and the worse the faster.
Right.
There's more raven in him than man.
Right.
So he's going to what you felt in the chapter previously, what we as you being the reader felt about, even though the townfolk really liked him, there's something off about this guy. So Marilyn, being an outsider, clearly views Fane in a different light than the townsfolk, because Egwene will immediately come to the defense of Podden Fane.
Right.
And Marilyn just kind of lets it go. It's like a pick your battles kind of thing, but you're once again seeing something here.
He negotiates the balance between knowing that he knows more than they do. We'll talk about that in a second. But he negotiates that balance between having a greater exposure to the world at large and relating to these people who live in an isolated existence. He negotiates that far better than Fane does, who holds himself in a superior standing to these people, whereas Tom knows he knows more, but is still trying to be friendly,
right,
without coming across as a complete jerk.
I think
that's
way better.
That's when Tom draws Egwene into being part of his act and bringing her the swoop of things and making her part of what he's there for, and he can use her and explaining about what he plans to do, telling the story wise.
Right. So he sets her out as being the prettiest girl in town. And then he introduces us to a whole lot of lore.
Right.
He introduces us to Artur Pendrag, Artur Hawkwing, Artur the High King. He mentions the Green Man and Trollocs and Ogier and Aiel.
What is the Green Man?
We don't know.
He's some mythical character.
You mentioned Aiel, and that's an important point because he compares Rand to an Aiel, and we have no idea what that is, and it's kind of one of those,
barbarians. They're some sort of barbaric race.
Something. Rand's as big as one is, whatever that is.
So obviously they're big. He mentions the stories of Anla, the wise counselor, Ahem, the giant slayer, Jine Farstrider, Mara and the three foolish kings, Len, the mask of the giant, Alsbeth, the queen of all. He mentions tinkers. So he develops these other peoples and this legend of the world that they all interpret as stories. And he obviously believes that there's truths to these stories that they don't see.
Adam, you mentioned earlier about the boys mentioned they'd been out and about to the town. That comes up right before he mentions all these stories where he's talking with Matt and Perrin, and he asks something about made-up creatures from stories. He kind of pokes fun at them a little bit, in saying, is that all these things are? You guys are that widely traveled then, so you know the whole world, huh? And they're like, well, we've been as far as
the Mire,
Devon Ride, the Mountains of Mist. And he's like, oh, well, look out. you're regular world travelers. So it's
well, la-di-da, fellas.
right. He's like, as far as that is what he says, and he kind of twirls his mustaches.
Right.
And I'm sure his eyes are gleaming just with hidden amusement, because the kids are kind of like, well, dude, we've been really far out. You don't even know. We've been there. And he's like, oh, okay.
Egwene is starting to notice that Tom is having a little bit of fun at their expense, and it takes Matt is the one who doesn't catch on as quickly as the other two or three.
Yeah, but Jordan brought it up that Perrin was like, he specifically said, oh, by the way, Perrin is not.
He's not boasting.
Not bragging about
no,
it.
Perrin's
Right.
just talking.
He's just like, this is how far I've been.
Right. It's a difference between Perrin and Matt that you're saying right away is Matt's a boaster. Matt's a storyteller. Matt's an attention getter. And Perrin's just lay of the land.
Those two are a little bit farther on the extreme ends of the personality spectrum, whereas Rand is a lot more in the middle.
That being said, we travel on with Rand and we don't travel on with them, so we get to experience more of him.
Oh, right. Rand is obviously, up to this point, the protagonist of this story. I mean, this is so far his story. So the other thing that gets developed farther here are the Aes Sedai.
Apparently
Tom is not a fan.
No.
Yeah.
So up to this point, the prevailing opinion seems to be that they're witches, though we still don't know exactly what they are or what they do. We kind of know where they come from. They come from somewhere in the north. Most people think they're evil. Obviously, so does Tom.
And this is where Tom meets Moraine.
He leaves
Tom's
away.
not really sure about her.
No, he seems pretty sure.
He's very wary about her is what I mean.
He's like, I'm gonna
go jump
hang out with
something away
Sanbui.
somewhere. No, I'm gonna go jump a roof.
Right.
Which is what he does. He has to go hang out with Sanbui.
Back to what we were talking about before, as far as like the legends that Tom spins, there's a mention of Trollocs. And that's when they kind of light up on the idea that, oh, yeah, those are the stories that, moms tell their children in order to scare them into behaving well. And Tom obviously knows more about the existence of them than that. And that's where he gets into the whole, what do you think you know about the outside world? And they try to develop the fact that they have an understanding of it. And he's alluding to the fact that they don't really know as much as they think they do.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the biggest thing that gets developed in this is that Tom has an experience with the outside world, with Aes Sedai, with all of these different locations and what populates the world outside. He knows more than they do, and he sort of has fun at their expense, but he also realizes when he's doing it and dials it back. He doesn't do what Podden Fane does, which is still kind of laugh at them inside.
He's also bloop, shown some pretty sweet skills.
Oh, was that your brrp, brrp, brrp sound?
I don't know what either of those noises are. What is going on right now? Yeah, he's got some talent.
Right, because he gives them a slight demonstration of what he can do there on the old foundations of the inn.
So we're also finding out after Gleeman goes away, Nynaeve has established the fact that she's grumpy with everybody.
Oh my gosh!
And there's the Raven agreeing.
Right.
Saying that, she's on the bad side of the mayors. She's got a short tongue with everybody. She's very bossy.
Yeah.
So there are two political entities here. You've got the Women's Council and you've got the Town Council, right?
Yeah.
And Nynaeve is the head of the Women's Council as the wisdom.
And apparently she's really young.
Really young.
She's obviously young and obviously sensitive about it. Right. Defensive about it.
I think she's defensive about how her oatmeal was made.
And it looks like Egwene is being
following in her footsteps,
tutored by her in some way, shape, or form, whatever comes of that. So she's young and snotty and defensive, and quite frankly, unpleasant.
You really don't like her.
No! She's just angry all the time.
She's grumpy, she's angry, and she's
and she has
bossy.
this cudgel that she walks around with and raps people on the head with.
Yeah, I mean, so, but then we get to the point where Bran and Tam, who they thought they were spending the night, are all of a sudden going back to the farm because of the decisions that the council has made. The council is now sending people out to the other towns to verify if all these stories are true.
This is where we get a sense of Rand's adventurous side. They create a watch to protect the town in the unlikely circumstance that this war comes to Emmons Field. And Rand volunteers for it. Mm-hmm. So Rand, who up to this point has demonstrated an understanding that his life is going to be carrying on at his father's farm, eventually marrying Egwene and having a farm of his own in Emmons Field, and that's perfectly acceptable to him, now has this desire for some adventure. So this is the first time where we get some deviation in his character.
Who knows? Is his adventurous nature coming out? Is he worried about the Black Rider?
Well, I think this is just more development of his character, that he's not just this simple bumpkin. He could be a Baggins whose entire image of tranquility is wrapped up in the simpleness of leading a country life, but he's not that.
I don't think so.
He's Bilbo and Frodo. He has a sense of adventure in him. It's just not a predominant characteristic.
He was gathering a bunch of information, though, is what he was doing, everybody. All the information that was gained through who saw the Black Rider, a lot of that was filtered through Rand. So.
Well, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that Rand is disconcerted by the fact that his primary support is Matt, who's a completely unreliable source for anything in the town. Rand realizes that I can't go to the town council with this guy being the other source of information. He's unreliable.
I love the way that this chapter closes out. Tam, just out of the clear blue sky, drops the line asking Rand if the other boys had seen the rider as well. Yeah. And just floors Rand. He's like, what? And Tam particularly does it away from everybody else. Rand just feels so much more at ease now that Tam believes.
Yeah, I love it.
So now I think he can walk home also with a better conscience, because now there's two of them looking out for this rider and this walk rather than just Rand.
Well, and the other thing that I like about that is that Tam mentions it, and Rand's instant reaction is, oh, well, let's go back to town now and let everybody else know. And we get a sense of Tam's wisdom here. He explains to Rand exactly why he's deliberately chosen that moment to reveal the information to him. And it's obvious that Tam is one of the wise souls on the village council.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
he's the voice of reason for sure.
We also
Sen Bowie.
who's just there for his superpowers.
I can't believe he's on the council.
We also get the fact that Rand shares some of that wisdom, that Rand's solid personality, that Rand's solid characteristics are what will lead him to follow in his father's footsteps someday. And you gather that through their interactions as they come into the Two Rivers and arrive at the doorstep of the inn, and as they then depart. And even though Rand doesn't want to leave, he wants to stay for winter night, he completely understands why his father is leaving. And so that's a nice segue into chapter 5.
I love the fact that his dad is basically like, he goes home and he's like, yeah, we might have to stay here. And his dad's like, I don't think there's anywhere you're going to miss tomorrow.
That's in chapter 5,
The father jokes about the fact that they'll both be so tired that they might sleep in. Right. And Tam says, well, that's not, we both know that's not happening. So they get home and there's...
It's life as normal. Right away.
Well, no. There's obviously a sense of there's a sense of foreboding, because they're looking under every stone and checking out every hidey hole on the property for the man in black.
But they're also just taking care of business.
Right. It's a dual thing.
But
there's
not
a bit of reticence,
not in the same way that they would have taken care of business before that morning.
It's not as carefree.
Right.
Toward the end of it, I feel like they were.
So what they do, because Rand mentions, hey, the sheep are acting completely normal. If there had been a foreign body here, they would have been skittish. Exactly. And it's
remember that guy that you saw?
Once they realize that nothing has disturbed the tranquility of their homestead, then they're ready to sort of settle back down, except Adam. Even at that point, they're not, because what does Tam do when they get in? Exactly.
Then he's like, oh,
check this thing out.
Look what I got.
Shishwing.
Yeah.
Check.
So they never reach a complete state of ease. There's this wonderful slow tension that has been building from the very first chapter until this fifth chapter.
When literally things hit the fire.
Right.
All I'm saying is that it presents a nice, like, sure, there's that underlying tension, but it also shows you what his day-to-day life would be.
Right. Mm-hmm. You do get the sense of exactly what these guys' lives are like, but there is something underlying it all which sets the reader ill at ease. So the door gets locked, which is almost a Hitchcockian moment. You can almost see the camera zoom in on the latch.
Yeah.
And the microphone volume getting increased. Click. Right, exactly. And
that's not important to everybody.
Then there's the question of, like, what are they locking themselves in, or are they locking something else out? I love the moment that everything hits the fan here. So there's a rattling at the door. It hits us so quickly because even though there's been a building sense of tension, it doesn't escalate. It's just sort of there slowly building, and then the door gets rattled, and a figure filled the doorway.
Yeah, the picture that he's painting is fantastic. Like, it's just all of a sudden went from 0 to 60 in, like, Tesla time.
Yeah, chaos.
First, you're intrigued by the sword, okay. Nothing's necessarily going to happen. It's weird he's got a sword.
Also pretty sweet sword.
We're getting ready to eat our stew, and then bam, the door bursts open, and there's this slight sense of relief. Oh, phew, it's not the Man in Black, it's just this demonic thing. And then the rest just start coming in, and what? I mean, it's just this crazy...
Wasn't there a knock at the door first?
No, it's a thud.
Rattling, like a thud.
It's a thud. The door gets bashed.
It wasn't like, hello.
Right, no.
Yeah,
no gentle musings from outside.
I bet you his dad makes a good stew.
Well, he wouldn't know because now the stew is covered with
everything
with
just
woolly
explodes.
Whatever. And it is that slowing down moment of this is going down and what is going down.
There is definitely that moment when the door bursts open and time gets slowed down as Rand has to take in whatever this giant thing is that is filling up the entirety of the doorway.
I don't even think he could take it in. It's just so fast.
It's a poop in your pants moment. There's no question about it. It's nightmare come to life.
Yeah.
It's these stories you hear as a child, and he doesn't even know necessarily what this is yet until it gets pronounced what it is. But it's like everything you were like scared of as a child is all of a sudden come to life. And not only is it come to life, it's bursting through your living room door. And once again, Rand doesn't freeze. Rand reacts. He's not a sheep.
Yep.
He's a fighter. He throws the pot of stew right into the face of this thing. So
a delicious stew.
It actually isn't delicious. No, you don't realize exactly how thrilled he is to throw the beet stew in the Trollocs face.
Like, yes, I'm rid of this stuff.
I've been waiting.
Right.
I don't have to eat this.
So now it's just pell-mell madness. Now it's the
inside a home.
Yeah.
Inside the home,
you can't
which isn't that
home,
big.
Right? Yeah, you can't imagine the home's very big. So
it's 2 stories.
He's trying to get away from things coming in the door. His dad's got the sword. Oh, his dad, who his whole life, he's never seen his dad in anything like this. All of a sudden, his dad's dancing around with the sword, hacking
just showing up.
Right. I mean, his dad's going to work with this sword.
There's not too much of it he gets to witness, though, because Tam tells him to get out.
And he jumps out a window.
And despite the active person that we've witnessed him to be, he also realizes the importance of getting out the window, and he feels guilty while he leaves through the window, but he does leave. So he eventually gets out through the window. And then it's just kind of a crazy dash around the farm property into the woods where he can hide in the shadows.
When he gets outside and the Trollocs are coming for Rand or sensing where Rand is, his dad distracts him and he draws him off. And he draws the fight towards him. But then Rand reunites with them once it seems like the Trollocs are gone.
So he leaves through the window, and this is pulled directly from the book. So letting the bar stay where it was, he darted to a side window, flung up the sash, and threw back the shutters.
It's kind of like Santa Claus.
Night had replaced the twilight completely, The full moon and the drifting clouds made dappled shadows chase one another across the farmyard. Yes, and it's the night before Christmas. This is exactly. This is Santa Claus and his reindeer are on the roof throwing shadows on the snow below.
We got another roof situation going on.
Clickety clackety, has not been here.
It's totally funny, but that's exactly what that sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he joins his father in the shadows. His father has him go to the barn to get Bella and have them escape to the town. And this totally reminds me of Han and Luke leaving the Death Star. And Rand is kind of covering the back as they retreat toward Two Rivers.
Only Tam's not doing so well.
No, Tam is obviously...
He's a little worse for the wear.
So we realize here, like you mentioned earlier, Dave, their nightmares have come to life. Trollocs are real. And how much of the other stuff that Tom had mentioned earlier in his tales now is real?
How alarming would that be? Because then just the way the mind works, well, if then.
Oh, yeah. His imagination is going 160 miles an hour.
Yeah.
On top of that,
he's just trying to survive at that point.
He has the experience with having gone back into the house battling Nard.
He finds out his father's injured badly. So that's why he has to go back into the house, because he's got to get something to take care of his dad.
Got to get his goods.
Right.
To bundle him up or bandage him up or whatever. Try to find something.
Rand has the sword, so he goes back into the house, and a Trolloc emerges from the pile of dead in the home.
He's just hanging out, waiting for Rand.
Right.
They actually have a conversation. So you've got this thing that you've imagined your whole life, and all of a sudden it's real, and now it's talking to you
and saying
horrible things. Right? It's trying to lure him in.
Right.
It's gonna be okay.
Right. I mean, oh my gosh. But once again, Rand holds his own.
Well done, boy.
Sort of.
I mean, it's an accident.
Right.
But he doesn't chicken out.
He's there.
He still tries to fight the thing. He doesn't turn tail and run. Also important in that conversation with the Trolloc is the mention of the Myrddraal.
Which brings us to chapter 6. They're going to the town. They've got to get to Emma's Field, and more importantly, Rand has to get his dad to Emma's Field because obviously Tam is not doing well.
No. Once again, Rand thinks on his feet very well, and he comes up with the idea of how to create the litter to drag, Tam to the town.
And he's getting real tired.
Well, he doesn't have a choice. He can't carry him on his shoulders all the way
there.
But
so there are people who are sedentary in nature, and there are people who are people of action. Rand is not a person to sit by and let the world come to him. He's going to go to it.
No, he's not Hamlet. He gets his father on the stretcher and drags him to the town.
Because Bella's gone. The horse has disappeared.
Right. Inconveniently, their named horse disappears.
Yeah, so now they got to go to the town. Rand, of course, he's got to be exhausted from starting. He just got in a fight with a Trolloc. His brain is like, what the heck is going on? Oh, by the way, your dad is really injured, and I got to drag him back to however far away this town is.
This is a superhuman event.
Yeah. Which we established was an hour and a half away on the road.
I'm thinking it's much more than that.
That's why I asked this question earlier.
Right.
It takes him all night to get there.
Because of this thing.
Well, so they make the trip twice in the day. It's a distance.
Yeah.
I mean, it's far enough away that the townspeople are concerned about them being all the way out there.
Yeah, it was a good distance on a cart and a horse.
Right. And now he's doing it just on foot with nothing.
Rand is Bella.
The most consequential, event is the father's delirious mutterings, though. We get the pseudo Luke, I am your father moment here, where Tam starts to completely undermine Rand's entire Genesis
world. Well, this is the first mention also of Rand's mom, and it rapidly goes downhill. It's undermining everything he thinks he knows, potentially, because Tam is delirious at this point, and he just starts babbling all sorts of stuff. He's babbling about his mom. He's babbling about battles, all this stuff, and Rand is like, would you please shut up? We got, who knows what around us. I want to stick a sock in your mouth, but the stuff that's coming out of his mouth is also drawing him in, too.
Well, there's a lot of adventure taking place around it, too, because he's trying to hide. That shit's happening. He might be being chased. All the information.
He's got to get to town fast.
Got to get to the town. His dad might be dying. And then guess what? Right after that, oh, look, there's another dude.
There's that guy whose cloak doesn't move.
His cloak doesn't move.
Right. So now we know that
How
that
far
dude.
away from him do you think they are?
It's
He's
funny.
pretty close.
You know what I picture? Remember, the cartoon Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman, where he's staring down in the cartoon, where you see him like way down that road, and you see the horseman at the end of the road, and he's standing there, and he starts coming at Ichabod Crane when he's carrying the pumpkin. That's like what I can see it. Like he's looking down this path, and you see him way down there, and you're like, no, that's not good.
So there's another.
Yeah, but he specifically passes by him twice.
Well, that's when he goes and hides.
There's another fantasy reference here, which is when
the other cartoon.
when the hobbits are leaving the
exactly.
Shire and the ring wraiths literally pass over the road and they're hiding in a ditch beside the
which
road.
is greatly represented
I
in the
think
movie.
That's
that's
what I think we're experiencing here.
Right, when it
He's
passes
that
him
close.
by. Yeah, when he first sees
Twice.
him.
Oh,
it's
yes.
it's that long off distance type of thing. But then, that's
In
the
chapter
absolute
1.
Frodo,
But
they're
here
all
in chapter 6, he's hiding in the tree line along the side of the
ditch,
road.
quote unquote. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
but he
it's
goes
really
back,
close.
And then he looks back and he comes back. He rides his horse that way, and then he comes back again. He's so
he
close.
crosses him
Not
twice.
once, but twice.
Yeah.
He crosses him twice.
Exactly.
I don't even know if we necessarily know if it's him, if it's the same one, if it's a different. Was the one he saw earlier in the day? Is
No,
it a
it's just
different? How many of these things are there?
Another character that looks the exact same. Yeah.
So how much of chapter 6 do we trust?
The stuff that Tam babbles about, he is incredibly, incredibly specific.
Agreed.
And I think Rand, once again, is not a dummy. Tam is describing a scene of a battle in vivid detail. They came over the Dragon Wall like a flood. Well, the Dragon Wall is an actual place. And Tam is talking about events like he was there. Rand is also picking up on things on his father that he never knew about before. His father has a sword.
Yeah, he also saw
his
a
father's
sword.
good with the sword. So some of these things, while as crazy and far-fetched as they seem, aren't so crazy and far-fetched in light of what he's seeing about his dad that night.
I trust most of it.
I would probably do so, and that's blowing Rand's mind.
Right. It seems that Rand is adopted.
That's the story we're getting.
Rand doesn't look like anybody else in the
Did
town.
you say adopted? Whatever that means in this world.
So this is where the story begins.
Yeah.
But
Now
your dad might die.
we are off and running with a protagonist who he's been transplanted
Allegedly.
into this quaint village, which has now been exposed to the outside
wee
world.
babe.
Everything's topsy-turvy. The weather isn't right.
There's war,
They're
there's-
being attacked by...
Question. Do we know where the Trolloc come from?
No,
No, they just appeared on.
We don't
We
even
have
have
no idea
time
where
to
they
think
come from.
about that. We're still grappling
came
with the
through the
fact that
door.
they're real.
They came
Yeah,
through the door.
right.
It's really weird.
It's mysterious. It's just part and parcel with the madness that's going on.
This happens in other fantasy stories. Even in Lord of the Rings, where the ring wraiths come from doesn't get developed until much farther down the road. You don't know
Yeah,
where
but
the
that whole,
antagonizing element originally comes from, which is
that.
part of what makes it so scary, because it's faceless. It doesn't have an origin. It's just there, and it's out to get you.
I love the way this comes to close, and it's a great stop point for us in terms of the chapter 6, the way it leaves out before he goes into town again, because it's just mind-boggling. But even in these first 6 chapters, let alone this last chapter and a half, from when that Trolloc first came through the door, just what has been revealed to Rand, and not only that, but what has Rand learned about himself?
What's pretty crazy, though, is that it's a lot of description for something that takes place in what?
So fast.
Other than
however many hours that
a
is.
mysterious amount of time
Right.
to this point. But
It's long.
other than that, that was
Yeah.
so fast. That was so fast, everything that took place.
There
For a
are
second.
a couple of key characters that get introduced here that were referenced in the prologue. During his mindless rambling, Tam mentions Laman and Avendesora and the Green Man.
Avendesora.
Yes, and the Green Man, yeah.
So we now know that the Green
meet
Man
that Green
and Avendesora are somehow linked,
Part and parcel.
and that somehow Laman is linked with Avendesora.
As
That
Laman
first
is
prologue
linked
is
with
so
Hotshot.
mysterious that, like, any clues that we can get to the individuals that were involved in it and all of that new terminology, we're gonna try to highlight as we move forward to make sense out of that prologue. and what it meant. So with that, we can now talk about what you're wearing, Adam.
Adam's Clothing Corner.
Right.
No, not what I'm wearing. I'm saying that we should talk about who do you think is the...
So you're not wearing anything? Is that what you're trying to tell us?
I'm apparently wearing booty shorts.
I'm entirely nude. The best people that were wearing things this week were Lan, who we didn't even really talk about.
Yeah.
Apparently, he has a cape that you just can't really see.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
How cool.
Which is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
If you like the idea of disembodied heads.
Hey, man.
Floating around.
We've already had a floating pumpkin head.
You don't even notice the head.
Anyhow, of course you would, because you can't see his body, so all you see is his head just bobbing around.
And the way he describes that cloak and the way he describes Lan and who wore it best. Yeah, Lan, for sure.
No, I don't think he did. No, Tom did. Tom wore it.
Oh, okay, all right.
You like Tom's cape better than Lan's.
He was my second option.
Okay, I
like
can
Tom's
see
cape
that.
because Tom was out there. He wore it, and then he just did his little frill. He waves that cape around in such a way that we should know how good it looks, but I have no idea.
And it has the key element of actually being visible.
Right.
I don't know that we
Lan's
can.
Invisible cloak.
Right. I don't know that the invisible cape can win who wore it best.
Man, I want an invisible cape. That would be awesome.
I mean,
cloak of invisibility.
The last thing we need to talk about is who leveled up, and obviously it's Rand.
Yes. There's no question. Rand is the leveling man.
Well, and Tam leveled up.
Yeah.
Tam leveled up. So we're going.
But
RPG.
Tam needs food badly.
If we're going up true RPG, Tam's intelligence went up, and Rand's everything went up.
Tam needs food bad.
Yes,
exactly.
Rand's attack went up.
Well, we're literally at Tam is about to die.
Rand, yeah, Tam's about to die.
Tam needs food badly. So the last thing is You're So Lame. Who is our least favorite character of these first 6 chapters?
Senbui.
Is it Senbui or is it Nynaeve?
Yes.
Oh.
No. There's no question.
Who's the most annoying? For me, it's between 3 people. Nynaeve, because man, she's annoying.
Yeah,
Senbui with his roof-hopping antics. And it's also Padan Fain.
He's pretty annoying too.
Personally, I get driven nuts by smarmy people.
Well, he's greasy.
He's greasy and smarmy and condescending, and he's all sorts of just gross. But rolled up into one package.
Yeah, but grease isn't like a needle in the eye.
No.
I'm gonna vote for Senbui simply because we get more of him. Yeah, we get more of him than we get of Nynaeve. Nynaeve is kind of in and out. Senbui is a constant canker.
Oh man, Senbui is the wet sand in your underwear.
Yes. So I'm definitely voting for Senbui. I don't know why the guy is still on the island. He should have been voted off a long time ago. And on that note, join us next when we cover the next 6 chapters. Thank you for joining us on the Jack of the Shadows podcast.
Jack of the Shadows.